excuse me while I put on my shades. Oh, yes, the better to cut out the harsh edges. The better to, there, see the difference? Take those shades off, and the next thing you know, you can see the clock, and you can see, all of it. Get up there, Big Herb, please. Well, the following program, we thought we'd give you this disclaimer, is in exceedingly bad taste, and quite possibly will it'll just bore you very badly. So we suggest, being the kind of person you are, Scarlatti and all that, Oh, listen, before we begin, it's, after all, this Monday night, and we would like to, we have a straw in the wind. Any of you ex-GIs out there, you may be interested in this. I don't suppose there's any ex-GI types out there. Hello, Test. Hello. Oh, I see. Hello, there. We had the wrong thing plugged in. No wonder. For crying out loud. What was I getting? Doesn't make any difference. It wasn't me. I think it was the Armed Forces Network or something. But nevertheless, for any ex-GIs we have out there, we have a very significant thing here tonight on this Monday. Over the weekend, all kinds of things slip and slide and begin to slip down. Like the other night, I'm listening to, I'm driving way up in Montauk, up near there, seeing you get all these stations from places like Bridgeport and that, and oh boy, when you get way out, have you ever driven all the way out to the end of Montauk, all the way to the very end? That's the furthest, most eastern point of the United States, Yeah. And it gets, that's it. You drive out there and there's nothing but water there, man. If you step off of Montauk and start walking, your hat is going to float. And the next place you're going to hit is going to be someplace like Madrid, Spain. Or, I think it is Madrid. If you went straight across, it's Spain. It's not England, And you see those evil, cold, miserable-looking waves coming in. And nothing is sadder than an East Coast surfer. Those little bitty waves, these guys are jumping up on these little tiny waves, and they're nasty, mean waves. You see, they're not surfer waves, you see. Everybody's seen these surfer movies, see, so you hear these guys holler, "Surf's up!" And the next thing you know, some guy's hitting his head on the rocks, and he's being battered to a pulp off maybe a 4-inch wave. And, of course, what makes it even funnier out is the water's 107 degrees below zero almost any given time. And here you got to swim through old SO oil drums, and it's kind of nice when you start, threading your way between tires and stuff. And there's one dramatic thing out there along this beach. There's a tremendous cliff, goes straight down. And way out on the end of the island, if you ever get a chance to drive all the way out to the end of Montauk, go out. It's very exciting. First of all, there's more wildlife out there than you will find, believe me, on 42nd Street. Of course, it's a different kind of wildlife. Well, I don't know. There's some pretty wildlife on 42nd Street, actually. But, hey, by the way, did you see me on that show, It's Hell of a Town, the other night? Did you see me do my tap dancer? It was fantastic. Just great. Oh, yeah, I whistled and played my thing here and did that. Right in Times Square. But you go straight east on well, I guess it is east. You just keep driving out towards the end of the island. You just keep going till there's nothing left. The last shopping center is left behind. The last Rayco seat cover joint, until finally you see, receding in the distance, the last Carvel ice cream joint, the last Dairy Queen, and it's the end. Nothing else left. Nothing but ocean. The waves coming in. Do you mind if I do waves here for you? That's not bad, is it? Well, that's the way they do, you see. And somebody, I noticed somebody, we're going to leave behind real remnants of our life, our times, and in strange places. Somebody has pushed what looks like about a 52 or a 53 Dodge, I couldn't tell really, off a cliff down there. And it's sitting on the beach, looking out to sea, but nothing's left on it. The body is gone, the seats are gone, the tires are practically rotted off, and there's nothing but this bare, rusted frame sitting there with the engine. and the engine's rusted over, and the gear shift knob is sticking up, and it's still got the Bakelite knob on it. You know, the gear shift handle, the shaft sticks way up in the air, and it's all rusted, completely rusted. But by now, you see, not only is it rusted, but there has been a kind of oxidation that goes above rusting, and it's kind of coated with this salt oxidation, and it's going to stay there. You can just see it. It's slowly sinking into the sand. And I looked at this thing. There is an instant artifact, a genuine ruin. And all around it are these washed rocks, thousands and millions of rocks that have been washed for maybe 200,000, 200 million years. And this thing is buried half in the sand. And the waves just keep just endlessly. And I'm walking along the beach, and it's a beautiful day. The sun is hanging out over the ocean, and a radar plane goes by, a Navy radar plane with a big bubble on the top. He's booming over about maybe 1,500 feet. He's maybe a half a mile, maybe more like a mile out to sea, just rolling along. Boom, 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 boom. And there's a low haze, and he just cuts through the haze and goes out to sea and makes a big left turn, because way down at the end of Montauk is a radar station sitting right at the very tip of the island, right out at the end. And right next to it is that beautiful Montauk light. Have you ever seen that Montauk light just going around? Just whoop, whoop. You just the big red and that big white light just keep going. And that's nothing out there, absolutely nothing. You could be 7 million miles from New York. And one night, I drove around. There's a kind of looping drive that goes right out. It's the most furthest east that you can drive when you get out to the end of the island. I made a loop out there around this little place. There's a sort of a parking lot out there, right in the shadow of the Montauk light. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden, 5 foxes came just drifting out of the undergrowth. There's a lot of sort of low, scrubby pine, real sandy type vegetation out there. And these 5 foxes just came drifting out, and they ran along the road right next to me. And they kept looking back. You could see them looking over their shoulders, and the headlights were catching them. And they were just gleaming, beautiful. They were big, full-grown foxes. And I'm just cooling around out there. And then I made the turn. I came back, headed back down the road, just right on the edge of Montauk. Now I'm on the other side. I'm on the I guess it would be the northern shore there, which is this is a little tiny thin point. Is this boring you out there? I mean, this is such a great place, and so many people haven't gone out there. It's about 120 miles from New York, but man, is it worth it? And I go out there all the time. You drift down. I drifted down after seeing these foxes. A giant deer, big buck, came out and just sort of stood for a second, and whoosh, he's gone. You see a flash of white, that little flash of that tail. He's gone, and he's disappeared. And then you drive about 3 or 4 miles inland. Of course, you're at no point are you inland, because this island out there is so narrow you can practically throw a rock across the whole thing. And here's this little tiny Montauk airport. And I think airports are a place that always excites me just because they're there, And I see a guy coming in. I think he was in a Mooney, and you see him coming in low with his lights flicking off and on. And he's got a strobe beacon flashing. He comes drifting in over the wires there, and down below you see him disappear behind the pine trees. And this is Montauk, way out at the end. And it's I don't know, it's especially at this time of the year. I've been fighting it, friends. I've been fighting it. I have been fighting the fact that it is fall. It is. Boy, you get out at Montauk and it is fall. All of a sudden, the temperature must drop 20 degrees. And I was listening to a football game that kept fading in and out, and it sounded like it was being announced by a 12-year-old kid. And at first, I thought I was listening to a junior high school game being played somewhere off across the Sound. And it turns out it's the University of Bridgeport is playing what? Was it Northeastern? Is there a Northeastern? And they were battling it out, and you could hear the crowd. You hear about 3 guys. You hear, oh, wow, wow. then it disappears. Have you ever listened to little stations when they're doing the game? You hear a hum, a heavy hum on the line. Give me a real hum, Herb. You can give me a hum, see? Big hum comes on the line, you know. Just pull the gain up. It's like this all the time. Yeah, he's got a real bad hum. And then he'd say, there goes Robert Chinatic. He's drifting back to the 5-yard line. It's a kick. It's down to the 34-yard line, and number 62 had the ball, and he fell down. And it's now on the 36-yard line of UB. It's certainly an exciting game here. It's an exciting game, and it's going right down to the wire. There's a big cheer going up over on the northeastern side of the stands now. We have a big crowd here tonight. Charlie, would you say, well, I'd say about that, too. And now they're up in formation, and it's Koznatsky. He's fading back, and he dropped the ball. They're rolling around, and it's number 12. I believe it's number 12 on Northeastern recovered. That's Watanabe, number 12. No, it's number 16. He's getting up now. And, there's a flag on the play, or somebody dropped something. And it was great. I was listening to this. That's the way it was, you know. And I'm way out in nothing. There's nothing but blackness on all sides of me. Nothing. There's just nothing out there. And I know that off Montauk, you know, I look out to that water out there, and I know that not too many miles off Montauk, in fact, I think it's just a couple of miles, there's a World War I German submarine that's lying in the water there. And it's, in fact, a friend of mine dove on it one day, who was a professional diver for some geodetic surveyors, and they're just laying out there. And also, there's about 5 big aircraft engines. They recovered one here a couple of years ago. A DC-6 went in just off Montauk. It's out there in that deep water. And of course, just past Montauk is one of the great shark areas of the world. There are more sharks, man, I'll tell you. And there's one sad thing about Montauk, if I may carry this out. You drive, that's sad, it's colorful, it's groovy. You drive in this little tiny town, and of course everything in this town opens up at 10 o'clock in the morning, and apparently it closes at 11:30 in the morning. Nothing is ever open except the Dairy Queen. And that's the big action in town. The Dairy Queen and the pizza joint, which is a little tiny place about the size of a closet. And you drive into town, and there's one building sticking up. It's eerie. It's the Montauk skyscraper. Have you ever seen that out there, Herb? It's a skyscraper, a genuine a building that sticks up. It's right out of Gloria Swanson. It's got a little touch of F. Scott Fitzgerald, a little of the Great Gatsby, and it's a famous story. No, I've heard it talked about once in a while. But somebody built this tremendous building out there, and it never made it. Back in the days when somebody thought that New York City was going to be there. And they bet wrong. And the building sits right in the middle of town there, surrounded by the Dairy Queen and the pizza joint, and White's Drug Store, where they're always having a year-end sale. No matter what time you go there, it's clearance. Big thing. It says clearance, special year-end, end of the season sale. You know, the season at Montauk is, 8-9 days long, roughly. But I just thought, driving past the radar station, you could see that big dish going round and round and round out there. These guys are stationed out there. And if you drive past quietly and turn off your engine and coast a bit, you can hear the sound of this big radar installation. You can hear the radar hum. You just hear it, and you hear boom, 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 boom. The generators going out there. And for those of you who are ex-GIs who might be interested in this, I am. And by the way, the reason I'm feeling a little bit introspective, it isn't every day that a guy gets a letter from Kathmandu, Nepal. Yeah, all these guys around the station, getting letters from Staten Island and Queens. Here's a letter from Jamal Kichapakari, Kathmandu, Nepal, one of our listeners. And all he writes in it, he's one of the spies, see? And this has got a Nepalese stamp. Beautiful shot of the Himalayas. And in fact, it looks like a shot of the hump, actually. It looks like one of the planes flying over the hump. Anyway, he just sends his little note in it. And just a little scrawled note. It says, I'm still running. One of the listeners. Kathmandu, Nepal. I thought, oh, man. We're all running, man. You ain't alone. And I guess going out, it's fall, and going out to the end of the island like that, and seeing this, and just being there, it's you get a tremendous sense of winter sneaking up. You just can't help it. And did you know that some of the best shark grounds in the world are just off Montauk? Just right off the end there. They go out and they fish for these giant sharks. And this is big-time fishing. And so I came drifting back down that little road past the airport. I saw that little Mooney coming in over these green evergreens. And drove in towards one of the best campgrounds in the country, by the way, Hither Hills. And this is it's there. And you hear the sound of that radar station. And then I thought of this note that I read in the paper. For those of you who are interested, I just received a bulletin from the Pentagon. And I know you're interested if you're an ex-GI. Listen to this, Washington, Pentagon. A menu item, remembered, if not hallowed, by every soldier and every veteran who ever was in the U.S. Armed Forces, will be missing from chow lines next year. Guess what they're eliminating from the mess hall, friends? Well, they don't call it what it's really called. It says, word has come down from the Pentagon that chipped beef stew is out. The high-level ruling putting chipped beef stew in the military memory bin with hardtack resulted from two factors. One, soldiers didn't like it. Now they're discovering. And get this one, it costs too much to prepare. Listen to this quote, and here's a typical Army statement. There has been a reduced demand for chipped beef, as the military is wont to call the gooey concoction, over the years, because of an increased preference by servicemen for meats in ground form. It's an actual quote from an official spokesman. Boy, isn't that a goggle-de-doo. I never heard it once called beef stew in the Army, friends. Had another name. And oh, yeah, it really did. You don't know the other name, Herb? You mean you've never seen SOS on the menu? You haven't? Well, you have encountered it if you have not encountered it by that name. Probably your Aunt Clara calls it something else. But every GI I knew called it something else. And, quote, Navy Captain James Warren, head of the Food Service Directorate, put it, and we quote, chipped beef stew was just too expensive for what we were getting out of it. Yeah, they were all pouring it in that big can in the end when you walk through the mess hall. And so, it's about time, I think, that... I knew guys that got hooked on it. The thing about Army food is like anything else, You get used to it. Sure, you drive your car. You got this clunker car you got out there, and you're driving it, and it's got a steady pull to the left. Every time you put the brakes on, the brakes squeal, and it's got that clunking sound in the back all the time, what sounds like somebody hit a bicycle in the trunk or something, no matter what you do to it. You kind of get used to this. And ultimately, that becomes part of your total psyche, just like people who learn, people who have a limp, they learn to walk with it, and they learn to work with it. Guys who have bad eyes or something, they learn to work with this. And in the Army, we used to look forward. In a way, I guess it's masochism, chipped beef. I remember one time standing in a long, long line of guys. The one great memory I have of chipped beef, and I'm not going to, you know what it's called. It's SOS. Great long line of guys. It's hot. Oh, boy, was it hot. It was always hot. Company K was always in places where it was either like 110 degrees or 5 below zero, and it's now 110. And we are waiting in a line. And it's maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night. And it's so thirsty and smelly. Everybody has been caking salt on their fatigues and just waiting in line for the mess hall to open up. And way at the top of the line, of course, there's always about 6 chow hounds that are always at the front of every line. One of them was Gasser. He was always the first guy in line, 6'9", and he had a lot to feed, so he was always first in line. So Gasser's up there looking in through the screen. See, I remember peering at the screen, trying to see what they got in there. And all of a sudden he turned. Just one little moment. I remember so clearly, like it's etched on my psyche. Everybody's standing in line. They're kind of quiet. Guys are just sort of shifting from one foot to the other. And once in a while somebody goes over and drinks from the Lister bag. We had this Lister bag. It's a canvas bag. It looks like the bottom of a cow. Actually, yeah, it did. It was a great big bag hanging down. It had these 4 big spigots on the bottom, placed exactly like a cow. And it was hanging from a tree. And they'd fill this stuff up with water, you see. It was kind of water. And they'd put these tablets in it, about 16,000 chlorine tablets in it, and other kinds of tablets, which they claim were good for us and would prevent us from getting unhappy in the service. And so they put all this stuff in the water, and you go over there, and it was supposed to get cool. See, and the guys, once in a while, a guy, by sheer desperation, he'd be driven to drinking it. And he'd run over and he'd put his mouth around this thing, and he's down on his knees, sucking at the Lister bag. Then he gets up and runs back. And it's hot. The heat is beaming down, just tremendous. Everybody's quiet, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, a tremendous attack occurred. I don't know whether you spent much time in the tropics, but there's constantly a running drum fire of attacks from unseen things in the tropic. Either it's fungus, where you got the fungus in the air. Now, listen, I knew guys that had I remember guys who literally were covered with so much fungus, Herb, that they were fur-bearing. And sure, I mean, you recover this stuff. And then when you got this fur, you see, it's the fungus growing out. Oh, guys used to have, like, moss growing on them. Yeah, they have moss growing up one side. And they used to turn, see, because we all learned in Boy Scouts that the moss is only on the north side of the tree, isn't that right? And so guys would find moss growing up the south side of themselves once in a while. So they would turn, constantly turning themselves so that the moss was right. You couldn't get rid of it. You learned to work with it. Other guys had athlete's foot that went all the way up to their knees. Other guys had my own hobby. My hobby was heat rash, and I used to have a fantastic case of heat rash. And I used to tend it like guys tend the garden. After a while, the heat rash was part of my life, and I'd just sit there and scratch the heat rash once in a while. And when you get a particularly good scratch, and it's just really groovy, and the sweat would run down my heat rash in the back, and it would burn and sting. And we're waiting in line at the mess hall. Okay? When suddenly this tremendous attack occurred, just like out of the blue, just a tremendous pow! Everybody, instantly, guys are rolling on the ground and screaming and yelling, hey, what the hell? Whoa! Sacco. It was like a million tiny, red-hot needles that had been heated were attacking us all over. And you could see nothing. And then, when you look very, very carefully, I don't know whether you've ever seen any of these things, tiny, I guess they call them, well, they're not sandflies. They're a type of mite, a sand mite, so tiny that they're smaller than the point of a pin, and they're airborne. They fly. They look like little tiny pieces of cigarette ash. So tiny you can't even believe this thing is doing what it's doing. It's a tremendous pain going up your arm. You look at this little tiny thing. It's a little bitty thing, so little, and you feel sorry for it. And you brush it off, and then there's another one. They're all over you. And so we're all standing there fighting these things, and then just like that, they're gone. Disappeared. And now the company's in an uproar again. Guys scratching and swearing and muttering. Somebody goes over and fills up his canteen from a Lister bag and comes back again. We're still waiting, you see. The chow is now a good 40 minutes late for some reason or other. And Gasser's up on the porch now. He's fought off the sandflies, and he's looking into something. When suddenly, just out of the blue, beautiful timing, Gasser turns. He's up on up on about 9 steps above us. You see, we had these little steps went up to the mess hall, and he's up on the landing. So he's looking out over us like it was like our speaking platform. And he looks out all over the whole crowd. Everybody's wearing his GI helmet, nothing but helmet, and we had these OD colored shorts, that's all, GI shoes, and dog tags. And each one of us had 17 pounds of sulfur salve and sand and mosquito bites on us. That's it. And each one of us had a pair of the most miserable, unbelievable, fantastic GI glasses you ever saw. They issued me a pair of GI sunglasses that are totally opaque. Not only that, they have this green stuff. I mean, they automatically made long green stripes on the side of your head. And the little nose pieces were not actual pads. You know how real glasses have pads? They had little augers or little drills that would drill right into your nose, these little pads, and you had to wear them. So we're standing out there. Everybody's so miserable. It was as close as I ever saw the company coming to an absolute total mutiny, you know. If Lieutenant Cherry had walked by that minute, I think he'd been, the vultures would have stripped him clean. There would have been nothing but this lieutenant's bones under the baking sun. But he knew when to stay out of the way. A really good officer, really good. In bad situation, one of the best things that a good officer can do is to know when to be totally gone, completely. It's a negative quality. And I don't know what he did. There were a lot of rumors where Cherry would go. Some said that he went out in back of his tent and buried himself in the sand and pretended he was at the beach. That was just rumor. I don't know. I never saw it. Others said that he disappeared and he was a mirage. Some said that he wasn't really there and that he would materialize only during time to hand out some more, you know what. But he was gone. The company's just standing by the mess hall. Gasser turns, looks down over the crowd, dripping sweat into the unsmiling sands, under the baking sun, under the attacking sand fleas, the lukewarm, chlorine-filled swamp water. Once in a while you could hear the hum of a rattlesnake in the middle distance, and the bark of a mating bull alligator, and you could hear the fester of the malaria deep in the bones of every third man, not to mention dengue fever, 45,000 other things that they were popping out with down there. Gasser looks out over the crowd and hollers, "Hey, fellas! Hey, fellas! Guess what we got tonight?" And just like that, it hit everybody. Now, it's not funny the way I tell it to you now. It's one of those moments. Everybody, just in one big roar, pow! Gigantic laughter roared out. Everybody knew what it was. No question. And Gasser turns back to the mess hall. He's right by the screen. And you see the screen door now suddenly slam open. Bang! Anger. And out steps Sergeant Kowalski, dressed in his suntans. Apparently guys of grades and officers do not get heat rash. I mean, I've often wondered at the physical difference between officers and men. You know, there were a lot of rumors about that. For one thing, I remember one time walking through the BOQ section of a place where I was stationed, and Zinsmeister turns to me and he says, "Do you think that they have got latrines over there?" And somebody else on the left side says, "Oh, no, that's ridiculous." And then the third guy, I think it was Edward, says, "Yeah, I understand they even have doors on the stalls," which was too much to believe. I mean, after all, this is the Army, see. And so there were a lot of rumors about that, whether officers came from a separate species. And a subspecies right under that were first three graders, because they never seemed to have the same stuff. I mean, you never saw a lieutenant covered with heat rash and sulfur. Oh, no, they always had these sharp suntans. You never saw them even have salt. We used to have the salt with the cake all over our fatigues. And so when Gasser hollered, "Hey, fellas, guess what?" Great roar. Fantastic laughter. Just rolled over the company. Just a tremendous... It was the first time the company had laughed in probably 6 months as a company. Now, why it was, I don't know. Have you ever been in a situation that was untenable? Untenable. But yet you tenanted it. Because you had a tenant. I mean, there's so many untenable situations that you have to continue to tend with. I mean, is there such a verb as tending? I mean, if it's untenable, obviously you should be able to tend something. But nevertheless, it was untenable. For 6 weeks, we've been nothing, you know. Heat rash, heat, nothing, alligators, mosquitoes, bugs, Lieutenant Cherry, all of it. And all of a sudden, an inane remark. It meant nothing. Hey, fellas, guess what's for supper tonight? And it hit everybody just exactly at the right place. Tremendous roar. And there one guy, Szymanski, mentioned Szymanski? One guy, Szymanski, got laughing so hard that Szymanski couldn't stop laughing. You know, hysterics took over. And Szymanski fell over, and he's laying on the ground, laughing. He's just screaming. And he's rolling around on the ground. Of course, everybody's looking at him by now. Everybody's laughing. But here's Szymanski flipping. And his helmet's digging up the sand. He's kicking his feet, you know, yelling and howling. His dog tags are digging in the dirt. And he's rolling over and over. And he's covering himself with sand because he has all this sulfur salve. And he's rolling. And all of a sudden, Edwards runs over and grabs a hold of him and says, come on, for crying out loud, Sim, cut it out. Szymanski, cut it out. And he couldn't stop. And 3 guys took him back to the tent. And you could hear him in the distance, roaring and screaming. As far as I know, he screamed and roared all night, but I was on the other side of the company area. I didn't hear it, but I did know that he screamed and roared when they took him away. This was one of those insane moments. I think everybody was half hysterical. And all the while, the great big old radar set we had, that giant monster with that huge set of dipole antennas, that giant dish, just kept rolling over and over. And we're rolling on the ground screaming because Gasser simply said, hey, fellas, guess what's for supper tonight? Well, I can't explain it. It wasn't funny. Well, that door slammed open, and another guy thought it wasn't funny, too. The door slammed open, and Kowalski comes running out, who's the first sergeant. Apparently, in the first 3 grades, you see, the point of breaking goes the other way. So instead of breaking by laughing, they break by flipping. So the door slams open. Pow! Ooh, is he bugged. He slammed that door open. Bang! And he stood out there with those green glasses. He wore these green Air Force ties. And everybody's quiet, except for one guy. Back in the tent, you can hear Szymanski. He is flipping back there. He's, as far as I know, out of his bird. They're pouring water on him now and hit them on the head, trying to get him to stop. And Kowalski just stood out there. The heat. In his pressed suntans with these beautiful stripes. He had these stripes that lit up, so he had them all wired with neon and stuff. And he's standing out there in those green glasses. I'll always remember him. He's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He was 5 feet 6.5 inches tall, weighed 178 pounds. He was built like a fire plug, with feet. Sharp. He slept in his stripes. He had them tattooed on him. And he's standing out there, looking at the company. Doesn't say a word, just looks. You could see those glasses glinting. Just looked. But the company knew it was a strange moment. It was us or them. We just stood. You could hear the flies buzzing. And the radar set humming. And Kowalski then steps back into the mess hall and slams the door. And then the chow line started to go through. In silence. Every guy's got his tray. And there back of the big serving hot plate, the KPs, were dishing out the SOS. The SOS that had made us laugh so much we almost flipped. And standing down at the end of the chow line was Kowalski with his arms folded, with the mess sergeant. And by the way, we had the only mess sergeant, I believe, in the entire U.S. Army, certainly in the U.S. Signal Corps, that cried. Our mess sergeant cried all the time. Yeah, I remember one night I was on KP. It was like 10, maybe 11 o'clock at night. And I remember I'm back there with another guy. I remember a red-faced guy that was in our company just for a week. And he was a sad one. He'd gotten the highest AGT score. That's the Army General Classification Test score. That's like the IQ. Ever recorded at some strange place like Fort Calhoun, Arkansas. And he was just 1 week. And you know why they got rid of him? He passed out 3 times in a row, just standing at attention. He'd just fall over. I think it was too much for him. And so he's down on his knees one night with me, and we're scrubbing the floor of the kitchen. That's always the last thing you do when you're on KP. You're just about ready to cork off. And I'm down on the floor there scrubbing away. Got these big GI brushes and the GI soap. And I look back over my shoulder, and I see the mess sergeant. And he's sitting at one of the tables, and he's crying. He's crying. It looked like, I was saying, you know, it's like seeing a grizzly bear whining, you know. He's crying. He's sending, big tears are coming down. And he's looking in at the two of us. Well, then he sees me looking at him, and he stopped crying instantly. He said, come on out, get moving. I want to see nothing but elbows. So I go back down, and I'm showing him a lot of elbows. And, of course, all the rest of it. And if you have any chick around there and you're an ex-GI, you'll tell her with the rest of it. But then, as soon as I bend back over and start to clean up the floor with this red-faced guy who got the highest AGT score ever recorded in Fort Calhoun, Arkansas, remember his name was Howard, I hear behind me, he's back crying again. Well, I went back to the barracks that night, see, and I said to one of the guys, I says, hey, did you know the sergeant, the mess sergeant, did you ever, any of you guys ever see him cry? And somebody sits up from his bunk about 3 bunks down. He says, yeah, I thought I was going out of my bird. Yeah, he was crying the other day when I was on KP. And so everybody started to exchange crying stories. I don't know what his secret sorrow was, but our secret sorrow was him. And so we're standing in line, going through the mess line, and Kowalski, the first sergeant, is standing next to the mess sergeant, who is looking like he's about to cry because somebody laughed at his SOS. And I don't know, there was something about him. And there was something about Kowalski. They seemed so sad this day. And we seemed so on top of it because we laughed. I mean, the worst thing a mob can do is laugh at people. You know, if I were ever going to run a demonstration or a riot, I think people make a mistake by throwing rocks through windows, and that doesn't do any good. I mean, that doesn't really make people mad. That just bugs them. If you really want to make them mad, just stand and laugh. Oh, boy. Oh, you want to kill. And we were on top of it. And we just walked through the chow line. Everybody knew it. And the KPs are saying nothing. And they're just laying that old SOS out. You know, plop, plop, one after the other, plop. And I got my canteen cup, and they filled it up with the Purple Death. We had this grape Kool-Aid that was fermented or something that they gave me. We called it the Purple Death. The Purple Death and SOS and candied stewed beets. That was the supper that night. So we're going, I don't know why they bothered to candy them. So we're going through the chow line. The temperature's 400 degrees in the mess hall. And everybody is sitting at the table. Absolute dead silence after the outbreak of laughing. And you hear just nothing but the sound of pots, guys eating, digging pans, clinking on the spoons, schlupping the Purple Death. By the way, Purple Death used to be great. I used to have this Parker 51 pen, and once in a while I'd use it to write home with. You just fill it up and you'd write. It was great. The only trouble was it was indelible. If you ever got the stuff on you, forget it. I mean, as far as I know, I've got a purple stomach now, deep inside of me from the Purple Death. And so we just eat. And then somebody started to snicker. Just snicker, you know, that snicker? Another one. 15 or 20 guys now are snickering and Kowalski's walking up and down the middle of the aisle, looking at everybody. His glasses gleaming. A couple more Snickers. He'd turn, he'd whirl. You know, it's very hard to tell where a Snicker comes in a mess hall. You seen prison pictures? All those guys sitting there, bending over, their fatigue, slopping down the slop, right? Well, that's the way the mess hall looks, see? And every time somebody snickered, he'd be behind him, he'd turn, he'd whirl. Guys are digging in, eating the SOS. And, of course, we had a tradition in the company. Whenever we got SOS, nobody ever asked it. We used to pour it all in the edible garbage can. We had two cans of garbage. One was called edible, and the other was inedible. And, boy, if you were ever caught throwing SOS in the inedible garbage, which was where it belonged, in the inedible garbage can, I mean, it was worth your you-know-what. And so this night, everybody eats his SOS, right down to the last bit. Gasser steps up, and he says, say, Sergeant, is there any more, a creamed chip beef? It's certainly a delicious stew you're serving tonight. And I would like some more of that delicious purple beverage that you're serving. I believe it's a raisin beverage, isn't it? The fermented Kool-Aid raisin? It's very good. And behind them comes Zinsmeister and Edwards. And that night, everybody finished everything. And every time a guy would come up for seconds, Kowalski'd get madder. We were bugging them by doing exactly what they always wanted us to do. There was a big sign that says, take all you want to eat, but eat all you take. And that night, they cleaned up all the SOS, cleaned up all the can't-eat stewed beets, drank down 7,000 gallons of the Purple Death. Somebody, I know at least three guys, even went back for thirds and fourths on the Purple Death. Of course, they paid for it the next day, but some guys got more guts than sense. And once in a while, off in the distance, you hear Szymanski hee-hawing in his tent, still flipped out. SOS, we're going to miss you. I'm sorry to see you go. In fact, we even had a tune called the SOS Blues, which I cannot sing on the radio, because the radio is the radio, friends.